I have to admit, I have a certain fondness for Dutch cyclist Michael Boogerd. Whether because of his Calvinist moral complexes or his fondness for show business, we have learnt a lot about the doping practices in the Epica peloton thanks to his confessions. Possibly the most complete in detail, specifying when, how and what vices the husband of the cuckolded Norena Roymans mixed in the most successful years of his career. A cyclist who all his life has been in the same team, Rabobank, a team from which today Jonas Vingegaard and Primož Roglič collect the seeds sown by the clients of the human plasma doping network. Do you want to know his story? Without further ado, let the show begin. Just 6 years after retiring, and after confessions from several of his teammates, the former Dutch champion claimed to have doped for 10 years of his career, between 1997 and 2007. In those days, it was customary for the big stars to always save a period earlier in their careers when they were supposedly clean. Something that not even their own mothers believe. Lance Armstrong took many more years to confess that he was doping as early as 1991. And Bjarne Riis claimed that it was only since 1993, with his stealth preparation by Dr. Luigi Cecchini, that he had doped, saving himself a few previous victories. In the case of Boogerd, no more and no less, we have to believe that he won clean the very hard stage of Aix-les-Bains in the 1996 Tour de France. His first victory as a professional cyclist, and in which this all-rounder was able to leave the winner of the Vuelta a España, Melchior Mauri, stranded to win in a tremendous downpour that left Miguel Indurain very ill, and that served for La Lanza to abandon the Grand Boucle, showing the first symptoms that something was not right in his longed-for testicles. Yep, arriving before those rivals on that day, we will believe that you were clean, bogey friend. And even more so after the testimonies of your former teammate, Danny Nielsen, who said that already in 1995 in the Rabobank team, there was more EPO floating around than in the blood bags of an Italian soccer team of the 90s. He especially stood out between 1998 and 1999, where he managed in the first of these years to finish 5th in the Tour of Shame of the Festina case, giving a surprising performance in the mountains, where he finished in the top 6 in all of those, wearing the jersey of the champion of Nederland. Although he does not admit that he doped in the Tour de France, we assume that he says this in order to be able to continue riding on French soil when he takes some of his favourite Russian prostitutes, since he himself said that he started his doping with blood transfusions in that season, where he also shone in the Spring Classics. In fact, that autumn he came very close to storming the bank with a double defeat to Switzerland's Oscar Camazand. First at the World Championships, where a puncture at the wrong time prevented him from getting close to the winning trio. And then at the Giro de Lombardia, where again the Swiss from Mapei would snatch victory by just 6 seconds. The following year he won Paris-Nice, ahead of two real EPO doping monsters. None other than Kelme's Colombian Santiago Botero in his European debut, and the Belgian Frank Vandenbroek experimenting with his mixtures of EPO, cocaine and sleeping pills. A brilliant result that was followed by a second in Liège, in which the Belgian dyed platinum blonde to mask out his doping obtained the best victory of his career by humiliating Michele Bartoli, and then a week later he had a great triumph in the home competition, the Amstel Gold Race in Limburg, where he won the sprint just by thousands of seconds over Lance Armstrong himself, who was testing the medicines of Dr. Ferrari in that test race. In fact, Boogerd was considered by the bookmakers as the main favourite to win the Tour de France. But he knew that if he went in so doped, he would never be a professional cyclist again, and he decided not to dope with EPO in France, to be anodyne, while the guy he had beaten months earlier began his Parisian tyranny. Boogerd was 27 years old, but from then on he disappeared from the highest positions of the cycling world, with the exception of his good 2001 campaign where he won Flèche Brabant, the overall of the Setmana Catalana, against two doping monsters like Danilo De Luca and Manuel Tricky Beltran, and finished in the top 10 of Tirreno Adriatico, Liège, Amstel, Flèche Wallonne, the Tour de Basque Country, Giro de Lombardia and the Tour de France, where he again performed very well in the mountains, although light years away from his best years. A year later he would win, as a gift from his friend Lance, a mountain stage in La Plagne in the middle of the Tour de France. As you can see, Boogerd was a very complete cyclist in the inclined events, with a great hill sprint and a good ability to ride on the flat. However, although he continued to dope, he only appeared in races that best suited his characteristics, especially his favourite Ardennes Classics, until he announced that he would retire in 2007, the year of his last dance. And, just as with the Chicago Bulls, there would be more drugs and women at that dance than in Dennis Rodman's bedroom. Boogerd was the most senior member of a full Rabobank team for the 2007 Tour de France. The team was led by Russia's Denis Menchov, a notorious Russian doped cycling deadbeat, and Denmark's Michael Rasmussen, the baldest, skinniest chicken your eyes have ever seen, a former winner of the King of the Mountains classification in the Tour, and whose doping positives in the Vuelta a España had been covered up. But alongside them, there were also other stars, such as the two Spaniards, Oscar Freire, triple world champion, and Juan Antonio Flecha, current YouTuber and cycling commentator on Eurosport. The Dutch core of the team was formed by veterans like Peter Weening and Michael Boogerd himself, and the young Thomas Dekker, who had surprised the world by winning that season the Tour of Romandy, totally doped ahead of other legends like the doped Andrei Kashenkin, the Lion Protector Cadel Evans, and the client of McDonald's, Chris Horner. He did it with Dinipo, the Delta variant of EPO, which in those days was the most advanced doping, because with it was easier to test negative in the anti-doping controls, and he had provided it both to him and to his core team, formed by the Dutch and Rasmussen, all coming from Dr. Luigi Cecchini. Yep, the same one who groomed Rees during his heyday in the 90s, and surely introduced him through the Danish chicken. Boogerd had a dual role, also encapsulating road captain at Rabobank with the youngsters, to look after them as if he were their father, and to dope them as if he were their private doctor. He did his best to make Thomas Dekker feel at home, because, for one thing, Boogerd would treat him to bottles of wine, and nights out with Eastern European streetwalkers in the middle of the Tour de France. Unfortunately, he didn't have very good eyesight, as Boogerd chose several girls who looked much better in the internet photo than they did in person, and he still paid while cheating on his wife. On the other hand, he taught the 22-year-old very well how to dope. Every 2 days, Dekker had to introduce 2,000 units of Dinipo into his veins, which made him fly in passes like Palajeres, where he led all his rivals with his tongue out. And yes, that doping was working wonders, and Rabobank were leading with a man who was indestructible in the mountains, Michael Rasmussen. At the tender age of 33, like his beloved Bjarne Riis, he was destroying the best climbers in the Tour de France. If the video gets a lot of likes, I'll tell the story from the chicken's point of view. But let's summarise, in that thanks to fleeing anti-doping controls and introducing several bags of blood, he had placed himself as leader of the Tour de France and had won 2 stages, one of them dressed up in yellow on the legendary Col d'Aubisque. But what surprised us the most was to see that man, only 2 years older than the chicken, but who had already been in decline for years, be the Danish man's best gregario in the high mountains. Of course, we later learnt that it was because Boogerd also participated in the blood doping of our starving Nordic climber. Oscar Freire himself, who, according to Rasmussen, was not part of this doping plot, assured the cameras that he did not understand how Michael Boogerd was going to retire that season, since he was climbing better than many young men in the peloton. The Dutchman had been involved in human plasma, a multi-sport doping group, along with Rasmussen in 2005. After spending over €45,000 on the cryogenic machines, they were both flying in that tour. Sadly, Rasmussen was ousted by the tour's pressures on Rabobank. And the orange outfit's displays were so hilariously grotesque that they ended up with the chicken's fine bones on the ground. And also that a clean man from a clean team, Alberto Conchatrol of Brynneil's Discovery Channel, could win. Boogerd and Dekker wanted to show their solidarity with their drug and partying buddy, but the team pressurised them with an abandonment of sponsorship and thus salary for the riders. That didn't stop our veteran Dutch friend from finishing an impressive 12th place overall, ahead of such museum horrors such as Iban Mayo, Chris Horner, Tadej Valjavec and Juan Jose Cobo. He retired and confessed, only to be suspended. You see, suspended by the UCI once already retired. Great job, guys. Today, Boogerd is still surprisingly well liked in the Netherlands, and has decided to join the ridiculous YouTuber craze of getting in a ring and denigrating the sport of boxing. In fact, here you have him bestowing a sovereign beating on YouTuber Thomas Cox in some repellent archive footage. At heart, let's face it, he's a streetwalker loving drug addict. He fulfills the classic boxer cliché. Let's hope Stallone hires him for his new Creed movie.